Hey guys, I'm out here cleaning shop update, getting ready to pull this Jeep back inside and work on it. And as I was moving stuff around and trying to clean up and organize a little bit, I'm not good at organization at all. So decided to stack some parts, put some parts on the shelves, and organize stuff. I came across a set of heads that I think you will find very interesting. A set of heads that I did in 2019, and I don't want to say they're cheater heads because there wasn't anything illegal about them. Let's just say they're extremely sneaky heads. And I'm going to give you a peek inside of how to race prep stock heads. I think you guys enjoy this.
I'd say it's a nut job.
All right. So what we have here is a set of just old FE heads. These are just generic heads. They're a common head, and I raced for a lot of years with an organization that was period correct to 67. These were the first set of heads that I built. They were for a 390. Now, a lot of people will tell you a 390 is not a good race engine, but we raced weight per cubic inch. So the smaller the cubic inch, the better I was. But I had to make it perform. We all know airflow is the way to make it perform. Now, what I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you a few things. Some things I may show you, some things I may not. But it would translate across to any head. So let's go back in time for a little bit. And if you know anything about just generic FE heads, they can be improved upon. They're not the best flowing head in the world. Now they make some good ones, but just the common ones, they're not the best heads in the world. Now, if you're going to race, the heads are a big portion of your horsepower. Gosh, I would dare to say a large portion of your horsepower comes from your heads. You can take a stock engine and put a good set of heads on it and make real power. So how did I stay looking period correct and make power with a 390? Well, here's one of the things that will get you when you're looking at them. One of the things that we had to do is we had to send them the casting numbers on our heads so they would know what head we were using and if they were legal heads or not. So I sent them a picture of the casting numbers on the heads. I'm legal, but this is why casting numbers mean absolutely nothing with old heads, because then you get sneaky people like me that want to do creative engineering that will best suit the head for my intended purpose.
Build it to certain specifications, which may be somewhat more desirable in assembly line specifications.
It is still a stock Ford casting, and that's where it stops. Well, actually, it still uses a stock Ford style plug, but that's where it stops. I have to make these stock heads perform like a race engine. Now, I had a 390 in my car at that time when I built these heads. I built them for a 390 that was a 30 over 390 with a hydraulic flat tappet cam in it. By all intent purposes, in a 4,000 pound stick shift car, that car should not be that quick. But I've got time slips that show a 762 with a 30 over 390, not a special piston. I'm talking a truck piston, the 4-valve dished piston is what I'm talking about. The piston that people will tell you will not work. I had a 30 over 390 with a stock hyperprotected piston and a flat tappet cam, and these heads in a 4,000 pound 4-speed car that ran 762, and it would run it like a bracket car. Now, I tended to back off, but that's a whole nother story. But let me show you what we've done to those heads and some of the things you can do. Now, one of the things about your valve train is, depending on who you ask, some people like a light valve train, some people like whatever. But I wanted to lighten up the valve train so it didn't have to work as hard. Less. Oh, hold on. I don't want to get carried away with a whole lot of technical stuff. I want everybody to be able to understand it. Think of it this way: if you're pushing something up and down and it's heavy, you have to work harder, and it takes energy to push that up and down. If you make something a little lighter, you can push it up and down a lot easier, especially when you're already at a disadvantage with a hydraulic flat tapping, which is known not to really RPM really good. I could turn this FE at 7,000 RPMs with a hydraulic flat tapping cam and never get valve float. So here's where I may catch a little flack, but this is what I've done. If you look at these springs, these do not look like FE springs. They're way, way tiny compared to an FE spring. I have an FE spring. Let me grab one and we'll compare it. Okay, look at these springs. This is an FE spring. This is aftermarket spring, but this is made for stock FE heads. They'll almost slide over the top. Actually, they will. They'll thread down over the top of this entire spring. That's how much smaller these springs are than these. These springs are also, if you look at them, they're the same. From top to bottom, they're the same spring. If you look at these, they're what we refer to as a beehive spring. They kind of narrow in. Think of Marge Simpson's hairdo. They narrow in as they get to the top. So the way these springs here work is a little different than the way these springs work. The way they function is different. That is a bad way to explain it, but the way they function is differently. Also, the keepers are smaller. Everything is smaller on these, so it lightens up my valve train. But there's a big advantage to going to a beehive spring versus a spring in this capacity. And I don't know if they make a beehive spring for an FE. They may or may not. I couldn't have used one in this case because here's where I'm going to catch a little flack. This is all LS. The valve springs, the keepers, the retainer, they're all LS. Even the seals here, they're all LS stuff. Lightweight, but hold a lot of RPM. I know. But again, we're trying to make the best performing head we can. Another trick that we've done, and again, these heads have been thrown on the shelf for years, so ignore the way they look. But another thing we've done is, if you look at these, first off, they're monster valves. These valves are way bigger than what the valves were supposed to be in this head. Bigger valve, more stuff you get in and out. But also, these valves don't sit exactly flush. They sit a hair above the surface. And then it gets a radiused valve job. And the reason you go that route is to make less obstacles for the air and fuel to travel around them. For the air coming in and the air to go out, you make less resistance. They don't have to drop out, come around and down in. They can just kind of flow around it. Think of the way the rain works on an umbrella, how it comes around it in a hard rain, versus if you had a triangle shaped umbrella, I guess, how it would have to come down and drop. But if the umbrella's round, it just kind of naturally rolls off. It's hard to explain, but it does help. The valve stems on these are also much, much, much smaller than a stock FE. Again, that goes back to valve train weight, and to make your valve train as light as humanly possible. All that adds up to being able to make this thing RPM higher, but to RPM faster than it normally would, because there's less rate or less valve train weight opening and closing these valves. Therefore, my car would wick up the RPMs a lot quicker than it would with a stock set of FE heads. Again, a lot of that has to do with the cam and all, but keep in mind, I'm trying to make this thing look like a stock motor because what they're going off of is these casting numbers. So I had a set of stock FE heads on an engine that if anybody looked at it, especially a non-FE guy, they'd just see valve springs and, you know, nothing out of the ordinary. Again, not illegal, just being a little bit sneaky about what you've got. I pulled these off when I went to my set of aluminum heads, when I went to my trick flow heads, and I haven't looked back, but the nostalgia of them makes me want to put these on something else and try them out. But another thing we done, of course, we cut the surface down, and we cut decent amount off these heads. We've done that to lower the CC number of these chambers, therefore it raises the compression. Again, I was using the wrong piston, but you got to understand, when I put this together in 2019, I had zero money. The pistons I actually was running a used set of pistons that were give to me. The cam that was in there was the only new thing I actually bought, and I had it ground, and it was one of those where everybody's scratching their head if it was going to work. These heads, I done the work on these heads and spent weeks working on these heads. So the squeeze may not be worth the juice for some people, but when you're working within a set of rules that require you to have something such as a stock head, or prefers you to have such as a stock head, at that time we could run aluminum heads, but we had to add weight to run aluminum heads. My car is already 4,000 pounds. I didn't want to have to add weight. One of the other things that we done, and a lot of people do this, but I done, heavily ported these heads. Now, there is some tricks to porting heads. One, you hear the term port and polish. I prefer not to do the polish. A little bit of a rough surface helps a lot. These heads, I mean, I can stick 4 fingers in these ports right here. I can get 4 fingers in there. These are massive ports. Now you have to match your intake to it, but these ports are massive. But one thing you want to do when doing this is leave just the tiniest little bit on the bottom. Don't port it down all the way at the bottom. You want that little shelf at the bottom. That helps that air when it comes across. Think of it this way. Velocity is what you're after. So if it just kind of drops down through there, it is what it is. Think of a baseball game. The fastest pitches are the ones that have the wicked spin on them. You know what I mean? So that shelf allows that air to drop down. As it drops down, it disrupts it just enough to kind of tumble effect and gains velocity. So these heads were heavily ported. These have so much work done to them that financially it would make no sense to build a set of heads like this unless you were confined to a set of heads like this. The point I'm trying to make with this is, just because you see a casting number right there, don't always believe what you see, especially if that guy's trying to race that car. These numbers right here may not mean a whole lot. And then changing your geometry a little bit with your valves, that valve being slightly angled in here will help that flow. I'm not going into all that. What I'm saying is, if you have the opportunity and the ability to slightly angle this valve a little bit, it does make tremendous gains. Not saying these heads have that, not saying they do, not saying they don't. What I'm saying is, with this video, is don't always trust the number that's cast on these heads. These heads flow incredible numbers. These heads, these heads really need to go on something else. I just set them aside and I haven't touched them again, but they really do need to be freshened up and put on something else. They really were a trick set of heads. For a factory set of heads, they really did make a world of difference. These things were trick. Now, you take a trick set of heads like these with the valves tricked out, the ports tricked out, both intake and exhaust ports were heavily ported. And I ran a custom set of headers on this thing as well. Again, all in the appearance of looking stock or looking period correct. You take a set of heads like this, and then, not saying I know anyone that would do this, but if you're also limited to running, say, a dual plane intake, hypothetically speaking, you could cut that intake, get very creative with the same tools you use to port this head, weld that intake back together, clean that weld up good, and then paint that intake, and you have a serious performing top end that really weight would be the only advantage of aluminum heads, because these things right here will seriously flow. They seriously make power, and combined with a good intake, you can get really sneaky out there. Don't always believe the numbers that you see on these heads. I try to do a little work to any set of heads. Now, I don't know if I will go this extreme ever again with a set of stock heads, because I have no reason to. I no longer am confined to those rules. So I don't know that I'll ever go this extreme with a set of stock heads again. But I may get sneaky and try some things on some heads. I may try some different things just to experiment with things and see how they work. This whole thing right here was an experiment. I didn't know how it would perform. That 390 that I built was the best performing engine that I'd had in that car up to the one that's in it now, but that's apples and oranges, because the one that's in it now is not far from 500 cubic inches, and this was 390 cubic inches, 396 cubic inches, I guess. And that's apples and oranges. Plus that one there is all trick flow on the top, trick flow heads, intake. It's got a solid roller cam in it. It's a completely different beast than what this was. This right here, these heads have a lot of time and a lot of work into them. But my point of this video is you can make a set of stock heads really perform. You have to decide if the squeeze is worth the juice. If you are confined to a set of rules that limit you on what you can use what you have. And this was the case for this. I was limited on what I could use, so I used what I had. And what I had, according to these numbers, wasn't that great. But once you change the size of the combustion chamber, once you change the size of the valve, once you change the valve spring or the valve train weight and make it much lighter and much quicker to rev, you change what these heads are capable of. Once you change these flow numbers in these heads drastically, it's amazing at what you can make a set of heads that look like junk really do. These heads are pretty incredible. Take it for what it's worth. You can make stock heads really perform. Also, this is the reason people have trust issues. Listen, I hope the Lord blesses you more than he did yesterday. I just wanted to give you a quick kind of look and rundown of what you can do to make heads better than what the factory ever perceived. Will I ever do this particular setup again? Probably not, just because if anything happens, it's not like I can go down to O'Reilly's and order a piece to fix it. This is all mad science stuff where it's this kind of spring, this kind of valve, this kind of keeper. There's shims under here, a certain amount of shims. There is a lot goes into this. So would I ever go through this again? Probably not. For that reason, plus the fact that I'm not confined to any of those rules anymore. But you can make a stock set of heads really, really show out and look like you have a bone stock 60-year-old motor. A set of heads like this could really hurt somebody's feelings. Again, hope you guys enjoy. Please share some of these videos. Hit the subscribe, like, and all that stuff. Comment. And maybe at some point in time in the future, we'll do something crazy with a set of heads or an intake or something and show. Not that I have ever modified an intake. I didn't say that. Uh, we will do some of this stuff and show you guys some of this stuff. But until then, God bless you. Him be all the glory. I hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.
I'd say it's a nut job.